Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse.
You unlock this door with a key of imagination. Beyond it, darkness, chaos, and stories that nearly broke the people who made them. The Twilight Zone wasn't just television. It was rebellion dressed in black and white, a show where censors fought every script, sponsors threatened to bail, and one episode got banned for 50 years. These are 20 weird facts about the Twilight Zone. And the bonus? Rod Serling smoked so much on set they had to add extra ventilation just to see the actors. Step through the door. There's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the truth behind the Twilight. Rod Serling didn't create the Twilight Zone because he loved science fiction. He created it because he was furious. For years, Serling had been writing hard-hitting social dramas for television, tackling racism, corporate greed, and political corruption head-on. And every time, the network censors gutted his work. Sponsors threatened to pull funding. Executives rewrote his endings. His Emmy-winning drama Patterns got praised, then buried. His script about the Emmett Till murder was rejected outright. The networks told him to stick to safe stories, entertainment without teeth. Serling refused to back down, but he was also smart enough to realize he needed a new strategy. So, he built a Trojan horse. Science fiction and fantasy gave him cover. He could write about prejudice by setting it on an alien planet. He could expose mob mentality by making the neighbors paranoid about invaders. He could critique nuclear paranoia, conformity, and McCarthyism, all while network executives nodded along, thinking it was just monsters and spaceships. The Twilight Zone became his weapon. Every episode a parable, every twist ending a gut punch aimed straight at American complacency. Serling later admitted the show saved his sanity because for the first time in his career, he could say what he actually meant, and no one could stop him. The iconic opening narration almost didn't exist. In the original pilot, Where is Everybody? There was no voiceover, no introduction, no Rod Serling standing in shadow explaining the premise. The episode just started cold. A man wakes up in an empty town. Silence, confusion, terror. CBS executives watched the rough cut and panicked. They didn't understand it. They didn't know what kind of show this was supposed to be. Science fiction? Horror? Drama? One exec reportedly asked, "Is this a Western?" So the network demanded changes. They wanted narration, explanation, hand-holding for the audience. Serling resisted at first. He thought the mystery spoke for itself. But the studio wouldn't budge, and Serling knew if he didn't compromise on this, they'd kill the whole show. So he went into a sound booth, wrote a short introduction on the spot, and recorded it in one take. That's it. No rehearsal, no script approval, just Serling's voice, calm and ominous, setting the stage. And it worked so well that the network asked him to do it for every episode. What started as a compromise became the show's signature. Serling's voice didn't just introduce stories, it became the threshold between reality and nightmare. And once you heard it, you knew you'd crossed over.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Westinghouse Desilu.
Rod Serling was a chain smoker, not just heavy, addicted. During production, he'd burn through 4 packs a day, sometimes more. On set, between takes, during script meetings, always a cigarette in hand. The crew got used to it, but the cameras didn't. Smoke would fill the soundstage so thick that lighting crews couldn't see their marks. Actors complained they could taste it in their lungs between scenes. The director of photography threatened to walk off because the haze was ruining shots, making everything look like fog had rolled into the studio. So, the production team had to install industrial ventilation systems just to clear the air enough to keep filming. Giant fans, overhead exhausts, air filters running constantly. It became part of the budget, and still, Serling kept smoking. In his on-camera introductions, you can see it. The cigarette always there, burning in his hand, a thin line of smoke curling up past his face as he delivers the narration with that calm, unshakable voice. It wasn't an affectation, it was dependency. Serling later admitted he'd tried to quit dozens of times and failed every time. The Twilight Zone's success brought him fame, respect, creative freedom. But it also brought stress, network battles, and sleepless nights rewriting scripts at 3 a.m. And every time the pressure mounted, he lit another cigarette. By the end of his life, he'd had multiple heart attacks, all linked to smoking. The Twilight Zone gave him a voice, but the cigarettes, they took it away. The show's most famous episode almost never aired. The monsters are due on Maple Street was too dangerous. That's what the network said. The script was simple. A quiet suburban neighborhood loses power. Neighbors start suspecting each other of being alien invaders. Paranoia spirals. Accusations fly. Violence erupts. And in the end, it's revealed there are no aliens. Just ordinary people tearing each other apart out of fear. CBS executives read the script and froze. This wasn't science fiction. This was a direct critique of McCarthyism, witch hunts, and the Red Scare. They told Serling to rewrite it, soften it, make the neighbors sympathetic. Serling refused. He told them if they killed the episode, he'd walk from the show entirely. The standoff lasted weeks. Sponsors got nervous. Advertisers threatened to pull out. But Serling had one advantage. The show was already a hit, and losing him would have been a PR disaster. So the network caved, but with conditions. They demanded the episode air late in the season, buried in a low viewership time slot, hoping no one would notice. It aired, and it became legendary. Critics called it the most important episode of television they'd ever seen. Audiences were shaken, disturbed, angry. Letters poured in, some praising Serling's courage, others calling him a communist. But Serling didn't care. He'd said what he needed to say. And the monsters, they were never the ones from outer space.
Sound asleep.
Most TV shows had comfortable schedules. The Twilight Zone didn't. Each episode had to be written, cast, filmed, and edited in 8 days. That's it. 8 days from blank page to finished product. No room for reshoots. No time for second guessing. If something went wrong, you fixed it on the spot or moved on. Serling was writing scripts faster than the crew could shoot them, sometimes finishing an episode the night before cameras rolled. Actors would get their sides the morning of filming and have to memorize pages of dialogue in minutes. Directors had one take, maybe two if they were lucky. The pace was brutal, relentless, unsustainable. Crew members collapsed from exhaustion. Editors worked 20-hour shifts. And through it all, Serling kept smoking, kept writing, kept pushing. He later said the schedule nearly killed him, but it also forced a kind of creative purity. There was no time for overthinking, no space for studio notes to water things down. You wrote it, shot it, and moved on. That raw, unpolished energy, it's in every frame. The Twilight Zone didn't feel like polished television. It felt immediate, urgent, alive. Because it was made by people running on fumes, adrenaline, and the belief that what they were doing actually mattered. One actress almost died on set, and it wasn't even during a stunt. The episode was The After Hours, a story about a woman who discovers she's actually a department store mannequin. Anne Francis played the lead, and in one crucial scene, she had to stand perfectly still among rows of frozen mannequins. The set was built inside a warehouse with no air conditioning, and the lights, massive 1950s film lights, generated brutal heat. Francis stood under them for hours, take after take, waiting for the crew to adjust lighting and camera angles. She didn't complain. She was a professional. But by the third hour, she started feeling dizzy. Her vision blurred. She tried to signal to the crew, but her voice wouldn't come out. And then she collapsed. Heat stroke, severe dehydration. Paramedics rushed in. They moved her to shade, pumped her full of fluids, and told the director she needed to go to a hospital. But Francis, still woozy, refused. She said if they didn't finish the scene that day, they'd lose the entire shooting schedule. So, after an hour of rest, she went back under the lights and finished the episode. No one watching The After Hours would ever know. On screen, she's calm, eerie, perfect. But behind the scenes, she was fighting to stay conscious. The Twilight Zone demanded everything from its actors, and sometimes it almost took more than they had to give. The network wanted celebrity guests, big names, box office draws. They thought that's what would make The Twilight Zone a hit. But Rod Serling had a different idea. He wanted unknowns, character actors, stage performers who could disappear into a role instead of playing themselves. So, when the network pushed him to cast a famous leading man for Time Enough at Last, Serling cast Burgess Meredith instead. At the time, Meredith was a respected actor, but he wasn't a star. He'd done theater, some films, but nothing that made him a household name. The network hated the choice. They thought he looked too old, too tired, too unremarkable. But Serling saw something else. He saw a man who could play loneliness, desperation, and quiet devastation without saying a word. Meredith delivered one of the most heartbreaking performances in television history. A man who just wants to read books, who survives a nuclear apocalypse, who finally has all the time in the world, and then his glasses break. The twist wasn't just clever, it was soul-crushing. And it worked because Meredith didn't play it big, he played it small, human, real. After the episode aired, Meredith became a Twilight Zone legend, returning for more episodes than any other actor. The network never questioned Serling's casting choices again, because in the Twilight Zone, you didn't need a movie star. You just needed someone who could make you believe the impossible. One episode got banned for over 50 years. The Encounter aired once in 1964, then vanished. No reruns, no syndication, no home video release. It was erased from the Twilight Zone canon as if it had never existed. The reason? The story centered on a Japanese-American man confronting a racist World War II veteran in an attic filled with war memorabilia. As tension builds, dark secrets are revealed, and the ending implies the Japanese-American character's father was a traitor during Pearl Harbor. Japanese-American advocacy groups were outraged. They argued the episode perpetuated harmful stereotypes and gave credibility to the racist myth that Japanese Americans were disloyal during the war. CBS pulled the episode immediately and buried it. For decades, it existed only in scripts and faded memories. Serling never publicly commented on the controversy, but friends said he was devastated. He'd written the episode as a critique of racism and prejudice, showing how hate poisons everyone it touches. But the message got lost. The network refused to rebroadcast it, and even after Serling's death, the ban held. It wasn't until streaming services started releasing complete collections that The Encounter resurfaced, now with content warnings and historical context. The episode remains controversial, uncomfortable, and deeply flawed, but it's also a reminder that even The Twilight Zone, a show built on challenging norms, could stumble when it tried to tackle America's ugliest truths. The show almost ended after one season. Despite critical acclaim, The Twilight Zone's ratings were inconsistent. Some episodes hit big, others barely registered. Sponsors were nervous, threatening to pull funding unless the show delivered more predictable numbers. CBS executives called Serling in for a meeting and told him the show was on thin ice. They wanted changes, more romance, more action, less philosophy, fewer ambiguous endings. Serling listened quietly, then stood up and walked out. He later told friends he'd rather see The Twilight Zone canceled than turned into something unrecognizable. But behind the scenes, he was terrified. He'd sunk everything into this show, his reputation, his career, his belief that television could be more than mindless entertainment. If it ended, he didn't know what he'd do next. So his agent worked overtime calling in favors, pitching the show's cultural significance, arguing that The Twilight Zone was building something bigger than ratings. And somehow, miraculously, CBS renewed it. Not because they believed in the show's mission, but because canceling it would have looked bad. The Twilight Zone had become too critically important to kill quietly. Serling got his second season, then a third, then a fourth, but he never forgot how close it came to ending. Every script he wrote after that carried the weight of knowing it could be the last. And maybe that's why the show never lost its edge, because Serling never stopped writing like he had something to prove. There's a reason The Twilight Zone feels timeless, and it's not just the writing, it's the music, or rather, the lack of original music. The show's budget was so tight that hiring a composer for every episode was impossible. So, the production team did something unusual. They licensed stock music, pre-recorded orchestral pieces from a library that anyone could use, eerie strings, ominous brass, unsettling percussion. None of it was written specifically for The Twilight Zone, but it fit perfectly. The music became part of the show's DNA, that creeping sense of dread that built slowly, never quite resolving. But here's the strange part. Because the music was stock, other shows used the same tracks. You can hear Twilight Zone music in old westerns, soap operas, even commercials. It should have broken the illusion, made the show feel cheap. But somehow, it didn't. The music became so associated with The Twilight Zone that when you hear those strings, you don't think of other shows. You think of twists, shadows, and Rod Serling's voice cutting through the darkness. It's a strange case of a limitation becoming a signature. The show couldn't afford a custom score, so it borrowed, and in borrowing, it created something unforgettable. William Shatner appeared in 2 iconic Twilight Zone episodes, and both times, he nearly walked off set. The first was Nick of Time, where he played a man obsessed with a fortune-telling machine. Simple premise, but Shatner hated the prop. The devil head machine was operated by a crew member crouched underneath the table, manually flipping cards. It kept jamming. Cards would stick. The timing was off. Take after take ruined because the machine wouldn't cooperate. Shatner lost his patience, threw the script down, and threatened to leave. The director had to pull him aside, calm him down, promise they'd fix it. They didn't really fix it. They just kept shooting until they got lucky. Then came Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the episode that made Shatner a Twilight Zone legend. He played a terrified passenger who sees a creature on the airplane wing, except the creature was a man in a gorilla suit with a mask, and it looked ridiculous. When Shatner first saw it, he laughed out loud. He told the director there was no way he could sell this as scary, but the director pushed him. Play the fear, not the monster. So Shatner committed. He screamed, clawed at the window, sold absolute terror. And somehow, it worked. Audiences were genuinely frightened. Not because the creature looked real, but because Shatner's performance was so convincing, you believed he believed it. The episode became one of the most famous in Twilight Zone history. All because an actor decided to trust the material, even when the monster looked like a guy in a cheap Halloween costume. Rod Serling wrote over half the episodes himself. 92 scripts out of 156 total. That's not collaboration. That's one man carrying an entire series on his back. He'd wake up at 4 a.m., write until the crew arrived, direct rewrites on set, then go home and write more. His wife said some nights he never came to bed. He'd just sit at his typewriter, chain-smoking, pounding out pages until dawn. The networks kept demanding more episodes, faster turnarounds, bigger ideas, and Serling kept delivering. But the pace destroyed him. Friends noticed he was losing weight, snapping at people, forgetting conversations. His doctor warned him he was heading for a breakdown. Serling didn't care. He said if he stopped writing, the show would turn into something he didn't recognize. Other writers contributed brilliant episodes, but Serling was the voice, the conscience, the spine of the Twilight Zone, and he refused to let go. Even when his body was failing, even when the stress became unbearable, he kept writing. Because for Serling, the Twilight Zone wasn't just a job, it was his legacy. Every script was a message he believed the world needed to hear, and he'd rather burn out than compromise.
A pool shark named Jesse spends countless hours a night practicing to achieve.
One episode cost so much it nearly bankrupted the production. The Odyssey of Flight 33 required a full-scale airplane interior, flight crew uniforms, cockpit controls, and effects showing a commercial jet traveling back in time. The budget exploded. Set construction alone ate up 3 episodes worth of funding. The production manager told Serling they couldn't afford it. Cancel the episode or find cheaper stories for the rest of the season. Serling refused both options. Instead, he made a deal. He'd write 3 bottle episodes, stories set in single locations with minimal cast and no special effects, to offset the cost. And that's exactly what he did. One of those cheap episodes was The Midnight Sun, filmed almost entirely in one apartment with 2 actresses and a broken air conditioner. It became one of the series' most memorable episodes. Another was 5 Characters in Search of an Exit, set in a single cylindrical room with 5 actors and almost no props. Also brilliant. Serling turned financial constraint into creative opportunity. The expensive episode aired, looked incredible, and nobody watching had any idea it was funded by 3 scripts written specifically to be dirt cheap. That's the genius of the Twilight Zone. Even when the show was broke, it never looked poor.
Have a dark surprise in store for them. One for the angels. When a little girl is trapped.
The show pioneered a technique that became standard in television. Breaking the fourth wall wasn't new, but the Twilight Zone did it differently. Serling didn't just introduce episodes. He'd appear mid-story, stepping into the narrative itself, commenting on the action as it unfolded. In A World of Difference, he literally walks onto the set while the actor is having a breakdown, blurring the line between fiction and reality. It was disorienting, unsettling, brilliant. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Some called it pretentious. Others said it was revolutionary. But Serling kept doing it because it served the stories. His presence reminded viewers they were watching something constructed, artificial, a parable rather than reality. And that distance, that awareness, it made the messages land harder. You couldn't just get lost in the story and forget the point. Serling wouldn't let you. He'd appear on screen, cigarette in hand, and remind you this wasn't just entertainment. This was a warning, a mirror, a challenge. Decades later, shows would copy the technique, but none with the same impact. Because Serling wasn't just a narrator. He was a guide through the darkness, and his voice carried weight that went beyond the script. Some episodes were so controversial they changed television forever. Death's Head Revisited aired in 1961 and showed a former Nazi SS captain returning to Dachau concentration camp. The episode didn't soften anything. It showed the horrors explicitly, condemned the perpetrator without mercy, and ended with the Nazi driven insane by the ghosts of his victims. NBC and ABC had strict policies against depicting the Holocaust on television. They said it was too disturbing, too divisive, too soon. But CBS aired it anyway, and the response was overwhelming. Survivors wrote letters thanking Serling for telling the truth. Jewish organizations praised the episode's unflinching honesty, but there was also backlash. Advertisers pulled out. Affiliates in certain regions refused to broadcast it. One station executive reportedly told Serling he'd crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed on family television. Serling's response was immediate and fierce. He said if television couldn't handle the truth about humanity's darkest moments, then television was worthless. The episode stayed, and it set a precedent. After Death's Head Revisited, other shows started tackling difficult historical subjects. The Holocaust, slavery, war crimes, topics that had been considered untouchable became fair game. The Twilight Zone didn't just entertain, it forced American television to grow up. The show's iconic opening sequence almost looked completely different. The original concept featured Rod Serling standing in a void, surrounded by floating doors. Each door would open briefly, showing glimpses of different Twilight Zone episodes, past and future, before slamming shut. It was ambitious, expensive, and technically impossible with 1959 technology. The effects team tried for weeks. Models, miniatures, projection tricks, nothing worked the way Serling envisioned. Budget meetings got heated. The network demanded a simpler solution. So, the team pivoted. They created that swirling spiral effect we all recognize, combined with stark imagery and Marius Constant's haunting theme music. It was cheaper, faster, and somehow more effective than the original plan. The spiral became hypnotic, pulling viewers into another dimension. And when Serling's face emerged from the darkness, voice steady and ominous, it felt like crossing a threshold. The opening sequence took 3 days to film instead of 3 weeks, cost a fraction of the original budget, and became one of the most recognizable images in television history. Sometimes the limitation creates the legend. One actor refused to do his own death scene, and it created chaos. In the Purple Testament, a soldier has the ability to see who's going to die next. In the final scene, he sees the mark on his own forehead, realizes he's doomed, and has to act out his death. But the actor, William Reynolds, had a superstition. He believed performing your own death brought bad luck, cursed your career, invited real death. He told the director he wouldn't do it. The director thought he was joking. Reynolds wasn't joking. He walked off set. Production halted. Serling was called in. He tried reasoning, bargaining, rewriting. Reynolds refused every option. Finally, they compromised. A stunt double would film the death from behind, and Reynolds would only appear in shots where his character was still alive. It required reshooting multiple scenes, cost them half a day, and nearly derailed the episode's tight schedule. But they made it work. The episode aired, and nobody noticed the trick. And Reynolds, he lived to be 90 years old. Maybe the superstition was real after all. The show's final episode wasn't meant to be the final episode. The Bewitchin' Pool was just another story in the pipeline. Nothing special, no grand finale planned. But when CBS unexpectedly canceled the series, it became the last Twilight Zone episode ever filmed. The cast and crew didn't know. They shot it like any other episode, wrapped production, and went home. Then the news came down. Canceled. Done. No warning, no farewell. Serling was reportedly devastated. He'd imagined ending the series on his own terms, with a perfect closing statement, something profound that tied together 5 seasons of storytelling. Instead, it ended with a story about children escaping into a magical pool. Not bad, but not the ending he wanted. Years later, Serling admitted he regretted not fighting for one more episode, a proper goodbye. but maybe it's fitting. The Twilight Zone never followed expectations. It started without permission and ended without ceremony. And in a way, that abrupt ending mirrors the show's entire philosophy. Sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes there's no closure. Sometimes you just step through a door and find yourself somewhere else entirely. Agnes Moorehead delivered one of the greatest performances in television history without speaking a single word. The Invaders featured Moorehead as a woman alone in a farmhouse terrorized by tiny alien creatures. The entire episode she doesn't speak. No dialogue, no narration until the final seconds. Just physical acting, terror, survival. Moorehead was a legendary actress, but this role pushed her to the limit. The tiny invaders were actually full-sized puppets and props that had to be manipulated by crew members just off camera. Moorehead had to react to nothing, fight invisible enemies, sell fear of objects that weren't really there. Directors called it the hardest acting challenge they'd ever witnessed. She filmed for 6 straight days, bruising herself on the set, straining her voice from screaming, throwing herself across the room in simulated combat, and she never complained. When the episode aired, critics called it a masterpiece. Moorehead's performance was so visceral, so committed, you forgot you were watching acting. And then came the twist ending. The reveal that she's not human defending against aliens, but a giant being attacked by human astronauts from Earth. The silence made the revelation hit harder. 1 performance, 0 words, infinite impact. Rod Serling knew the show wouldn't last forever, but he didn't expect what came after. When the Twilight Zone ended in 1964, Serling assumed his career would continue evolving. He'd move to films, maybe write novels, keep creating. But Hollywood didn't want him for anything else. He pitched movies, got rejected. He wrote spec scripts, no one bought them. Producers told him he was too identified with the Twilight Zone, too locked into one style. He became typecast as the Twilight Zone guy, unable to escape his own creation. It broke him. He took jobs he hated, writing for series he didn't believe in, making commercials, doing voice work. Friends said he felt trapped, defined by something he'd created as an escape. The irony wasn't lost on Serling. He'd built the Twilight Zone to free himself from network constraints, to say what he wanted. And in the end, it became another kind of prison. He died in 1975 at age 50, 3 heart attacks in 2 years, his body destroyed by stress and cigarettes. But his voice, that calm, knowing voice, guiding us through the darkness, it never died. The Twilight Zone outlived him, outgrew him, became bigger than the man who created it. There's one episode that still disturbs people more than any other. It's a Good Life featured a 6-year-old boy with godlike powers who terrorizes an entire town. He can read minds, alter reality, wish people into the cornfield forever. And everyone lives in constant fear, forced to smile and say everything is good, even when it's a nightmare. The child actor Billy Mooney was only 7 years old during filming, and he was terrified, not of the role, but of the adults around him. The director pushed him hard, made him do take after take, demanded real menace from a 2nd grader. Mooney later said he didn't fully understand what he was portraying, just that everyone kept telling him to be scarier. When the episode aired, parents were outraged. They said it gave children too much power, normalized tyranny, traumatized young viewers. Some schools banned discussions of it. But Serling defended the episode fiercely. He said it wasn't about children. It was about unchecked authority, dictators, anyone with power and no accountability. The child was just a symbol. And maybe that's the most disturbing part. Decades later, people still watch It's a Good Life and feel that same creeping dread because deep down we all know what it's like to live in fear of someone who can't be questioned.